My husband was a renowned noble gentleman of the capital, tending to my health day after day for 10 years. Only when I bled from all 7 orifices and died did I learn he had been adding mercury to my medicinal meals every single day. Reborn into this life, watching him carry a bowl of food toward me, I accepted it with a smile, then turned and served it to my stepchildren. Your father dotes on you the most, eat up. My stepson ate with relish, but my stepdaughter set down her chopsticks and looked at me. Her smile exactly like mine had been moments ago. Something off about it. The evening meal still held some warmth, but the room was bitterly cold. On the round rosewood table, the exquisite bone china bowls and dishes were still laid out. That nourishing snow clam soup personally brought over by my husband Gu Huayan now sat quietly in 2 dainty sweet white porcelain bowls. Then I had personally portioned it out for my stepson Gu Lang and stepdaughter Gu Sisi. Gu Huayan had already left. He needed to handle official business in his study. Before leaving, he reminded me as tenderly as always, Ninian, you're tired today. Rest early. Since you've given the soup to the children, I'll stew another batch for you tomorrow. His eyes were full of tenderness, exactly the same as every single day of those 10 years in my past life. But all I felt was my stomach churning violently, that familiar nausea tinged with a sweet, bloody taste nearly surging up from my throat. I forced it down, my gaze falling on my 7-year-old stepson, Gu Lang. He was scraping the bottom of the bowl with a small spoon, his face full of lingering satisfaction. Father's soup is just so good. Sweet, even better than what the kitchen makes. Innocent, childish words. Yet at this moment in my ears, they felt like a sharp blade stabbing viciously into my heart. Yes, sweet, because it contained licorice and honey to mask the toxicity of mercury. I turned my head to look at my stepdaughter sitting on the other side, 14-year-old Gu Sisi. She hadn't moved. That bowl of soup, she hadn't touched a single drop. She just sat there quietly, a pair of phoenix eyes that bore a 70% resemblance to Gu Huayan's, staring at me without blinking. That gaze wasn't like the clarity a 14-year-old girl should have. Instead, it was frighteningly deep, hiding scrutiny and probing that shouldn't belong to someone her age, along with a hint of sympathy. The room was terrifyingly quiet. At my signal, the maids silently cleared away the dishes and withdrew, closing the door behind them. In the vast room, only the 3 of us remained. Gu Lang was still savoring the deliciousness of the soup, completely oblivious that the atmosphere in the room had already become tense to the extreme. I was the first to break this deathly silence, my voice controlled to be extremely gentle, yet carrying a chill as if squeezed out from cracks in ice. Sisi, this soup, how does it taste? Gu Lang innocently blurted out the answer. Delicious. Mother, will you have father make it again tomorrow? I ignored him, my gaze locked firmly on Gu Sisi's face. She finally moved. She picked up the silk handkerchief from the table, leisurely wiped the corners of her already clean mouth, then raised her eyes, looked straight at me, and spoke word by word. Crystal clear. Mother's good medicine. Sissy dare not enjoy alone. With a boom, my mind went blank. Good medicine, dare not enjoy alone. These 6 words, like a thunderbolt, exploded beside my ears. There was meaning behind her words, and those sharp eyes seemed to have pierced through all my disguises, seeing the towering hatred deep in my soul. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, blood rushing to my head in an instant, then turning cold just as quickly. Could it be? An absurd thought surfaced, filling my entire mind. I licked my dry lips, my voice trembling, and spoke in words only the 2 of us could understand. In my past life, I drank this soup for 10 years. The moment I finished speaking, I saw Gu Sisi's feigned composure crumble, her eyes full of hatred. She clenched her fists under the table, her knuckles turning white. She lowered her voice, which carried a hoarseness and pain as if scorched by raging flames. I only saw your wretched state on the last night. She closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembling incessantly, as if recalling that wretched sight. You were bleeding from all 7 orifices, collapsed on the cold ground, yet he wouldn't let anyone come near. He said you had caught a terrible disease, and was afraid of spreading the sickness to others. Then, he sent me to the family temple outside the city. She suddenly opened her eyes wide, her beautiful phoenix eyes filled with the flames of vengeance. He said, I was grief-stricken over my mother and had developed hysteria, that I needed to rest and recuperate. But I knew it was because I accidentally overheard the conversation between him and that person in his study. I heard Mercury. I heard the Duke Manor's dowry. At the family temple, I pretended to be mad while secretly investigating. Finally, I found the remnants of the prescription he had burned. Just on the night I was about to escape and go to the Duke Manor to deliver the message, her voice stopped abruptly, and a strange, relieved smile appeared on her face. I accidentally slipped and fell into the cold pool behind the mountain. That water was so cold, Mother Rebirth. She was also reborn. I froze instantly, the wild joy in my heart nearly overflowing. I'm not fighting alone. In my past life, I died filled with hatred. My greatest regret before death was that no one knew of my grievances, and no one could avenge me. I even once resented Gu Sisi, this stepdaughter of mine, thinking she was cold and distant, showing no filial affection toward me, her stepmother. But as it turned out, she was silenced by her own biological father, Zan, my hypocrite of a husband, Zan, with his own hands. All because she was investigating the cause of my death. The misunderstandings from my past life are all gone now. Between us, only a common enemy remains. And an equally boned and deep hatred. Former rivals have now become the best of allies. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Who was that person in the study? I asked the crucial question. Shen Yuao. Gu Sisi spat out the name without hesitation, her eyes filled with undisguised contempt and disgust. Your dear cousin, our family's guest. Shen Yuao. It really was her. That white lotus who lived off my family, always putting on an act of being gentle, virtuous, and brimming with talent. In my past life when I was gravely ill, she came to my bedside every day to tend to me, asking after my well-Zan being, calling me cousin so sweetly, closer than real sisters. I was actually moved by her kindness and considered her a close confidante. How ironic. What dirt do they have? I pressed on, gleamed shrewdly. On the third shelf of the antique display cabinet, in Gu Huayan's study, behind the blue Zan and Zan white plum vase, there is a hidden compartment containing all his secrets. Good. This is perfect. My path of revenge instantly transformed from a thorn Zan-covered, single Zan plank bridge into a wide Zan open road with an insider and intelligence. I looked at Gucc, and she looked at me. We didn't say another word, but a single exchange of glances spoke more than 1,000 words. The Revenge Alliance was officially formed, and our first shot would be fired at that innocent child who was still savoring the taste of fatherly love. In the middle of the night, heart-wrenching cries indeed came from Gulang's room. I was immediately startled awake and rushed over without even having time to properly put on my outer garment. Langer, what is wrong? I rushed to the bedside, only to see Gulang drenched in sweat, his little face scrunched up in pain, clutching his stomach and rolling around on the bed. My stomach hurts. Mother, my stomach hurts so much. He cried so hard he could barely catch his breath. I immediately turned around and sternly ordered the servants who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion. Quick, go fetch Imperial Physician, Wang. Tell him the young master has a sudden illness and have him come as fast as possible. The entire Dio residence was instantly lit up, thrown into complete chaos. Gu Huayan was also alarmed. By the time he arrived with his outer garment draped over him, Imperial Physician Wang had already gotten there. I was holding a handkerchief, wiping Gulang's sweat while tears streamed down my face, endlessly blaming myself. It is all my fault. It is all my fault. Gu Huai and frowned at the chaotic room and asked in a deep voice, What happened? I raised my tears and reddened eyes, looking at him full of panic and helplessness. Husband, I don't know either. Langer was fine after dinner. How could he suddenly? Imperial Physician Wang stroked his beard, stood up and replied, reporting to Lord Gu. The young master has food stagnation, and combined with catching a chill at night, that is why his stomach pain won't stop. From the pulse, it seems he consumed overly rich tonics in the evening. A child's digestive system is delicate and couldn't process it for the moment. Overly rich tonics, everyone in the room. Their gazes, whoosh, all focused on Gu Huaiyan at once. Everyone knew that tonight's only tonic was the bowl of snow clam soup that Gu Huaiyan had personally stewed for his wife, which his wife then shared with the young master. I let out a whimper at just the right moment, clutching Gu Huaiyan's sleeve, crying nonsense stop. It is all my fault. It is all my fault. My husband goes to such trouble for me every day. I always thought the children should also feel some of this fatherly love. I was stupid. I shouldn't have given the tonic my husband made for me to Langer. Husband, punish me. I cried as if my heart was breaking, as if I really was a muddle-headed mother who loved her child, but made a terrible mistake. Gu Huaiyan's face instantly turned ashen. What could he say? Could he say that the soup wasn't a tonic, but poison? Could he admit in front of all the household servants that what he fed his son wasn't fatherly love, but a death sentence? He couldn't. He could only swallow his knocked out teeth along with the blood and carry this blame squarely on his own back. I saw that the gazes of those servants behind him had quietly changed. Within their former reverence, there was now contempt. The image of a loving father who, to please his second wife, disregarded even his own son's health and fed him recklessly just like that, was firmly established through my tearful accusations. Gu Huaiyan looked at me, a cold, probing light flickering deep in his eyes. I knew he had grown suspicious, but I just kept crying even more heartbroken, even more helpless. Come on, my dear husband. This game of chess has only just begun, late at night when all was quiet. Gu Huaiyan dismissed everyone and came to my room alone. He didn't light a lamp. By the cold moonlight seeping through the window, I could see him standing before the bed, tall and slender, like a jade sculpture. But I knew what filthy, rotten insides were wrapped beneath that jade sculpture. Nian Nian, he spoke, his voice still as warm and gentle as jade, as if carrying the power to soothe hearts. What happened today? I don't blame you. It was my lack of consideration. I forgot that Langer's stomach couldn't handle it. He sat on the edge of the bed and gently held my hand. His hands were warm, just like over those 10 years in my previous life, the warmth that passed from his palm every time he fed me medicine. But now, I only felt that warmth like a branding iron, burning my skin raw. It is just... He changed the subject, his fingertips faintly brushing against the back of my hand. In the past, you were never willing to share the medicinal soup I stewed for you with anyone else. Why did you suddenly think of giving some to the children today? Here it comes. His probing. I suddenly yanked my hand back, turned away, my shoulders trembling slightly as I let out suppressed sobs. Is husband blaming me? My voice was thick with nasality and grievance. Just whenever I see Cece and Langer, I always feel like I owe them. As their stepmother, not being able to give them a blood Zan-related sibling is already my sin. Husband, you treat me so well, so I thought I'd let them feel more of their father's love too. Am I being stupid? I turned around, gazing at him with Tarzan-filled eyes, those eyes brimming with humble love, guilt, and the fear of being suspected by my husband. This was exactly the reaction a simple Zan-minded inner courtyard wife, who deeply loved her husband and felt guilty towards her stepchildren for being unable to bear children, should have. Gu Huaiyan stared at me fixedly for a long while, the sharpness and scrutiny in his eyes finally slowly fading, replaced once again by his usual tenderness and pity. He sighed, pulled me into his arms, and gently patted my back. Silly girl, how could I blame you? You just overthink things, and are too kind. His voice sounded above my head, carrying a relaxed sense of relief. It is my fault. I shouldn't have asked so much. Your health is already poor. Don't worry about these things anymore. I lay in his embrace, my face showing deeply moved attachment, yet my eyes held nothing but cold mockery. Look, this is the man I loved for 10 years. He never loved me. He only loved my stupidity, my controllability, and this devotion of mine that allowed him to push me toward death without any burden. In his arms with a tearful voice, I proposed my next plan. Husband, since the tonics aren't suitable for the children, then how about switching to incense instead? I've heard that calming incense can soothe the mind and focus the spirit. Nothing is better for scholars. A few days ago, my maiden family just sent over a batch of fine ambergris with an elegant fragrance. Most rare indeed. I was thinking of burning some in your study as well, Zian, firstly, to help you relax. And secondly, it would be a token of my devotion as your wife. Upon hearing this, Gu Huaiyan indeed showed a gratified smile. Nenyen is always so thoughtful. How considerate of you. He thought this was my cautious attempt to please and make amends after the medicinal cuisine incident. He could never have imagined that this calming incense was the true deadly remedy I had carefully prepared for him. The next day, I feigned illness and had a maidservant go to my generous Dari storeroom to fetch that box of sodzian called ambergris. Closing the door, I opened the incense box, and that domineering and unique exotic fragrance instantly filled the entire room. I took out a small paper packet from my sleeve, containing the finely ground aconite powder I had prepared long ago. Aconite extremely hot in nature and toxic, used alone in small doses, or combined with other herbs. It can restore yang and rescue from collapse, but it has an extremely hidden property, Zian, under specific temperatures and conditions. Its toxicity will slowly combine with mercury, forming a deadly poison that can silently damage the nerves of the human brain. And ambergris has such a strong and domineering scent, enough to seamlessly mask the faint smell of the aconite powder. I carefully mixed the aconite powder into the incense, stirring repeatedly until no trace could be seen. After finishing all this, I personally carried the incense burner and went to Gu Huaiyan's study. Gu Huaiyan was handling official business. Seeing me come, a gentle smile appeared on his face. Why did you come in person? For such a small matter, just let the servants do it. I wanted to light it for my husband with my own hands. I lowered my eyelids, my voice soft. Only this way does it feel like this incense is lit for my husband. While speaking, I placed the prepared incense into the burner and lit it. Soon, a rich yet elegant fragrance began to spread throughout the study. Gu Huaiyan took a deep breath and praised. What a fine incense, indeed. Just smelling it makes one feel clear, Zian-headed. I looked at him and smiled faintly, that smile concealing the most vicious curse. Yes, clear Zian-headed. Soon, you'll never be clear Zian-headed again. Just at this moment, Gu Sisi walked in, obediently, carrying a plate of freshly cut fruit. Father, mother, she curtsied properly, placed the fruit plate on the table, her gaze casually sweeping over the incense burner before quickly lowering. Using the opportunity to serve Gu Huaiyan food, she slightly turned her body to block his line of sight while signaling to me with her eyes. Zian, the location of the secret compartment, she had already confirmed it once more. From that day on, I stayed in my room every day, ill, yet without fail, I personally blended incense for Gu Huaiyan. My virtuous wife persona became ever more deeply ingrained in people's minds. And Gu Huaiyan, this hunter skilled in scheming, finally stepped, bit by bit, into the trap I had tailored Zian made for him. In just a few days, the drug's effects began to show. Late one night, I heard from the night Zian watchmaid that Lord Jiu had suddenly felt a palpitation while reviewing documents, nearly knocking over the teacup beside him. Another time, while discussing matters with colleagues, he briefly lost focus and only came back to his senses after being called several times. He himself assumed it was merely due to overexertion from recent court affairs and worrying about my health, and didn't take it to heart. Yet, when he lost focus again, I held a bowl of calming soup, walked to his side, and said with concern, "Husband, are you tired? Have some soup and rest a while." He took the soup bowl, looked at my pale yet smiling face, and the wariness in his eyes had vanished without a trace. He held my hand, full of tenderness. "Nian, you've worked so hard. Once some time has passed, and I've finished the matters at hand, I'll take you to the manor in the outskirts of the capital for a proper rest." I nodded meekly, an iced and cold smile hidden in the depths of my eyes. Rest. No need. The 10 years of torment I suffered in my past life and this life I will make you taste it twofold. The prey had already begun enjoying his poisoned bait. My dear cousin, Shen Yueyao, finally couldn't hold back any longer and came to visit. She carried a pile of expensive tonics, under the pretense of visiting me in my illness. The moment she entered, she grasped my hand, her eyes rimmed with red, looking even more distressed than I was. Cousin, why have you gotten thinner again? Your complexion is frighteningly pale. She looked me up and down, and in those seemingly gentle and affectionate eyes, there flickered a light like a venomous snake sizing up its prey. I heard that brother Zan Law has also lost quite a bit of weight lately. He must be exhausting himself taking care of you. Sigh. You two are so devoted to each other, but you must also take care of your own health. What a lovely understanding flower. In just a few words, she pointed out Gu Huaiyan's deep affection, probed my illness, and placed herself on the moral high ground of being a caring family member. If it were the me from my past life, I would have been moved to a complete mess regarding her as my only confidante. But now, I only felt her voice was like nails scraping against a rough surface, grating and nauseating. I immediately played along with her words, squeezing out a few touched tears, grasping her hand in return, and choked out. Only my dear sister cares about me. Your brother Zan Law treats me, truly. Nothing to say. It is my useless body that has been dragging him down. As I spoke, I deliberately coughed violently several times, the coughing bringing a sickly flush to my face. Shen Yao hurriedly patted my back to help me catch my breath, speaking words of comfort, but deep in her eyes was the gloating smugness I knew all too well. She thought my body was already a lamp running out of oil, not far from death. Just at that moment, Gu Huaiyan returned from court. The moment he stepped in and saw Shen Yao, his steps faltered, and the two quickly exchanged a covert, yet lingering glance. The sparks flying in that glance, if it were the me from my past life, I certainly wouldn't have understood, but the me now sees it crystal clear. In there was suppressed desire, the unspoken understanding of a shared secret, and also greed for everything about to fall into their hands. I immediately struggled to get up from the sick and went to meet him. Husband, you're back. My voice was weak yet full of longing. Gu Huaiyan immediately stepped forward quickly, supporting me, his brows tightly furrowed. Didn't I tell you to rest properly? Why did you get up again? His tone carried reproach, but even more of what outsiders would see as hartash. Right in front of Shen Yueyao, I took out a clean silk handkerchief from my sleeve and carefully wiped away the non-existent thin sweat from his temples, then personally served him freshly brewed hot tea. Husband toils for state affairs and worries about me. I just wanted to look at you more. I portrayed the image of a frail, naive wife who regarded her husband as a god to absolute perfection. I saw Shen Yueyao standing to the side, her face wearing a gentle and proper smile, but the hand at her side and her fingernails were nearly digging into the soft flesh of her palm. She was jealous. She was jealous that I could openly possess all of this, jealous that I could receive all of Gu Huaiyan's favor and status in front of others. Very good. What I wanted was exactly for her to be jealous. Jealousy is the best weapon to destroy a woman's reason. I leaned against Gu Huaiyan's chest, as if a gust of wind could blow me over. Then, at the most opportune moment, my coughing illness flared up again. This time, it was more violent and more terrifying than before. I coughed so violently it felt like my lungs were being torn apart, as if I was going to cough up all my internal organs. Quick, summon the imperial physician. Gu Huaiyan immediately scooped me up in his arms, shouting harshly at the servants, his face showing just the right amount of panic. What a fine display of deep marital affection, so convincing that even I almost believed it. I knew this performance was meant for Shen Yueyao to see. He wanted her to know that I was on my last legs. He wanted to put her at ease, to let her continue lying low and waiting. And amidst all this chaos, an opportunity that no one noticed quietly arrived. Gucc came rushing in from outside carrying a medicine bowl, and as she passed by Shen Yueyao, she accidentally tripped and crashed right into Shen Yueyao's maidservant. Aya. The maidservant let out a startled cry. The tray in her hands was knocked over, and an elaborately embroidered sachet she had been holding close also fell to the ground. The scene became even more chaotic. Everyone's attention was on me, the dying patient, and the flustered Guyan. Only I watched all of this coldly from the corner of my eye. "Gu Sisi, my good daughter, well done." She quickly scrambled up from the ground, not bothering to dust herself off, and instead beat everyone else to picking up the fallen sachet. She held up the sachet and let out an exclamation full of childlike innocence and curiosity. "Huh? Why does this sachet look exactly the same as the one hanging in Father's study?" The crisp, childish voice sounded particularly jarring in the chaotic room. In an instant, all sounds vanished. My gaze and Gu Huayan's, like two sharp arrows, shot toward that small sachet at the same time. On it, a pair of intertwined twin lotuses with necks entwined was embroidered in gold thread. That was Gu Huayan's favorite pattern. Shen Yao's face drained of all color with a whoosh, turning deathly pale as paper. Her maidservant was so frightened, she fell to her knees on the ground, trembling all over. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted from a deeply loving couple heartwarming scene to a catching adulterers in bed tense suspense. Gu Huayan's expression turned ugly to the extreme. I weakly spoke up at just the right moment, rescuing them from their predicament. "Silly child, what nonsense are you saying?" I leaned in Gu Huayan's arms and laughed feebly. "This twin lotus pattern is the most fashionable in the capital this year. Your father likes it, so naturally others like it too." I extended my hand toward Shen Yue, a tolerant and magnanimous smile on my face. "Cousin, please have your servant get up. Cece is just a clumsy child." I returned the sachet to her, my fingertips intentionally or unintentionally brushing against the cold back of her hand. A storm seemed to have been effortlessly diffused by me, the magnanimous and generous official wife. Gu Huayan breathed a sigh of relief and shot me a grateful glance. Shen Yueo also forced a smile, took the sachet, and thanked me repeatedly. But once the seeds of suspicion are planted, they will sprout and take root wildly in the darkest corners. Gu Huayan would wonder why Shen Yueo was so careless as to carry this token of their secret affair on her. Shen Yueo would fear whether Gu Huayan might grow distant from her because of my magnanimity. Their seemingly unbreakable true love alliance, from this moment on, developed a fatal hairline crack, and I, without lifting a finger, obtained the first piece of physical evidence of their affair. I lay in bed, listening to the sound of Shen Yueyao, hastily taking her leave outside, a cold smile curling at the corner of my lips. "White Lotus, I'd like to see whether you, this White Lotus, can still stay pure and pristine when the waters of this pond are muddied." The opportunity came faster than I expected. 3 days later, a piece of news exploded like thunder through the upper circles of the capital. Gu Huayan, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, had committed a breach of etiquette at a high Zan-profile civil officials' tea gathering hosted by the Hanlin Academy, right in front of the Grand Secretary, and a host of important court ministers. It is said that at the time, he was raising his cup to offer tea to the Grand Secretary, when that Han Zanlong, renowned for its steadiness and elegance, capable of writing exquisite prose, suddenly began trembling violently without any warning. A cup of fine Prezan Rain Longjing tea was splashed straight all over the current Grand Secretary. The entire room was shocked. This news was relayed back to the Duke's mansion at the first opportunity by a servant from my maiden family, then conveyed to me through my brother's mouth. My brother Zhang Yan spoke while gloating. That brat, usually putting on such airs, acting like Mount Tai could crumble before him without batting an eye. This time he has completely humiliated himself. The Grand Secretary's face turned black as the bottom of a pot right on the spot. "Little sister, don't you think he has been scheming against people too much lately and got his comeuppance?" I lay on the couch, lightly coughing while covering my mouth with a handkerchief, my eyes full of excitement and satisfaction. Comeuppance. No, this wasn't comeuppance. This was the effect of the medicine. It was the comeuppance I personally prepared for him. That night, Gu Huayan returned extremely late, reeking heavily of alcohol. The moment he entered the room, he kicked over the flower stand by the door, and a fine Ruware sky Zan blue glazed vase crashed with a clang, shattering all over the floor. This was the first time since I married him that he had shown such a loss of control and rage in front of me. His face, gentle as jade, was now twisted with anger and barely concealed panic. His gaze so sinister it seemed like it could drip water. I immediately sat up, startled from the bed, looking at him while trembling, my voice full of fear. Husband, what is wrong with you? Who made you angry? Don't scare me. My fear seemed to bring him back to his senses. He looked at my pale, frightened face, waved his hand irritably, his tone stiff. It is nothing, just some troublesome matters at court. But I heard at the tea gathering, husband, I said carefully, with the most worried tone, touching his most sensitive nerve. Enough. He abruptly cut me off, like an enraged beast, a woman's foolishness. I said it is nothing. I'm just tired. His words were tough, but I could clearly see that his other hand hidden in his sleeve was also trembling slightly. He was afraid. He was afraid of this feeling of losing control that he couldn't master. I was too scared to speak anymore and could only hang my head, silently shedding tears. After a long while, the smell of alcohol on him dissipated somewhat, and his emotions calmed down a bit. He walked over, sat on the edge of the bed, and his tone softened. Nyenyen, it was my fault just now. I scared you. I just shook my head and said while crying, Husband, let's have the imperial physician take a good look, your hand. I'm so worried. No need. He refused flatly, a flash of embarrassment and wariness in his eyes. I know my own body best. I've just been overworked lately. A few days of rest, and I'll be fine. How could he dare summon the imperial physician? He was afraid the imperial physician would discover the abnormalities in his body, and even more afraid they would find out about his years of exposure to mercury. The only one he would summon was that trusted doctor of his, Dan, the one who colluded with him and helped him prepare the poison, and that doctor's diagnosis would only ever be internal stirring of liver wind or excessive rumination, prescribing some inconsequential sedatives and calming medicines, never finding the true cause of the illness. I was certain that tonight he would surely be restless and unable to sleep. This was the perfect time to make my move. Night reached the third watch. I quietly rose and changed into a set of black night clothes, suited for easy movement. Goosisi was already waiting for me at the small gate outside the courtyard in her hand. She held a small wind lantern with a black shade, leaving only a gap at the bottom, and just enough to illuminate the path at our feet. Mother, everything is ready, she said in a lowered voice. I had the small kitchen send father a calming soup. I tripled the amount of sedative in it. I've also taken care of the servants patrolling the front courtyard, and tonight they'll avoid the path to the study. I nodded approvingly. This child's mind was even more meticulous than I had imagined. The two of us, like two black shadows, passed silently through the quiet courtyard and arrived outside the study. I took out a slender bamboo tube from my sleeve, aimed the Predzan prepared, more potent knockout incense at the gap in Gu Huayan's bedroom window, and gently blew it in. After making sure he had completely fallen into deep sleep, I used a wire I had hidden long ago to skillfully pick the study's door lock. Creaked Zan with a soft sound, the door opened. In the study, the rich scent of that ambergris from daytime still lingered. Relying on my hazy memories from my past life, and Goosisi's hints from earlier today, I walked straight toward that curio shelf. Third tier, blue Zan, and Zan white plum vase. I carefully took down the plum vase, its cold surface pressed against my palm, my heartbeat uncontrollably quickening. I reached out my hand, carefully feeling around on the wall behind the plum vase. Finally, my fingertips touched a slightly protruding brick. I pressed it hard. With a soft click, the bookshelf beside it slowly slid inward, revealing a pitched and black hidden compartment, just big enough for one person to pass through. A stale odor, mixed with the scent of ink and the musty smell of paper, rushed toward me. This is it. I exchanged a glance with Goosisi and walked in without hesitation. The hidden compartment wasn't large. Inside there was only a locked red sandalwood box. This couldn't stump me. Using the same method, I quickly opened the box. The moment the box opened, my breathing stopped. Inside, a whole box full. All of them were letters. There were also several account books. With trembling hands, I picked up the topmost letter. That familiar, graceful, and elegant handwriting, Zand. It was Shen Yue's. My beloved Huayan, reading these words is like seeing you in person. Today I saw my cousin looking so ill, and my heart ached for her. Yet thinking of our future together, I can only hope she finds release soon. After she is gone, all the generous dowry from the Duke's mansion will belong to us, and you can pursue your grand ambitions without worry. Another letter was Gu Huayan's reply. Written in his slender gold script, Zan, that hand famous throughout the capital for its bold elegance. Yueyao, there is no need to blame yourself. Zhang Nian is frail and ill and fated, never meant to live long. I married her solely to pave the way for my career. Now that the Duke's mansion has become my greatest asset, once it is no longer useful, it should naturally be discarded. You and I have endured until now, just one step away, Zan. Don't let all our efforts go to waste. One letter, then another. It contained detailed records of every illicit affair and every conspiracy they had engaged in over the past 10 years. How they planned, after my death, to legitimately seize my priceless dowry under the pretense of raising the stepchildren. How they schemed to gradually dismantle the military power held by my father and brother, claiming it for themselves. They had even planned what identity Shen Yue would use to marry into the Gue family after my death and observe mourning for 3 years, earn public sympathy with the virtuous reputation of caring for her late cousin's children. Then have Gu Huayan, moved by her devotion, take her as his wife. What a moved by his deep affection. What a grand ambitions. Overwhelming hatred, like boiling lava, surged and exploded in my chest. The image of my past life, Zan, bleeding from all 7 orifices. In agony worse than death, Zan overlapped with these heart-Zan-piercing letters before my eyes. I almost couldn't control myself from screaming out loud, tearing everything here to shreds. My body trembled violently, my teeth biting down hard on my lips, until the taste of blood spread through my mouth. The pain instantly brought me back to my senses. I can't, not yet. Tearing them apart would be letting them off too easy. What I want is to make them ruined and disgraced, wishing they were dead. I took a deep breath and put all the letters and account books into the cloth bag I had brought with me. Then, from my bosom, I took out another stack and the letters I had prepared long ago. These letters were forged by me, spending countless days and nights imitating Gu Huayan's handwriting. The content had only one theme, Zan colluding with the commanders of the 3 border garrisons, embezzling military funds, plotting rebellion. In the letters, Gu Huayan and the border generals discussed in detail how to falsify troop numbers, how to transfer military funds allocated by the court into private banks, and how to use this money to secretly recruit soldiers and horses, waiting only for the right moment to cleanse the emperor's side and usurp the throne. The content of each letter was enough to doom him and the family behind him beyond redemption. I placed these forged letters neatly into the rosewood box. After finishing all this, I took one last look at this hidden compartment that had held 10 years of sins. My gaze cold as iron. Gu Huayan, you'd never imagine this even in your dreams. The secret room you used to hide your affair is about to become the tomb that buries all your ambitions and future. Back in my room, I didn't sleep all night. Just as dawn was breaking, I picked out the most harmless letter from that pile of evidence. It was a love poem Gu Huayan wrote to Shen Yueo with explicit words and lingering affection. The date on it happened to be the very day a few days ago when my coughing fit flared up, and I nearly fainted. I put the letter into an ordinary envelope without any signature, then summoned my most loyal dowry maid. Find a way to deliver this letter into my father's hands at the Duke's mansion. Remember, it must be done without anyone knowing, Dan. Absolutely no one can trace it back to us. The maid looked at my pale, yet unusually resolute face and nodded firmly. Next came the waiting for my father, Dan, fierce as fire, and who loved his daughter more than life, Dan, to raise the curtain on this storm of revenge for me. The thunderous fury from the Grand Duke's mansion came faster and more fiercely than I had expected. That afternoon, The gates of the Gu mansion were kicked open from outside. My father, Duke Zhangshao of Zhengguo, clad in full military armor, radiating murderous intent, with a squad of Weldzan-equipped personal guards behind him, burst in like a god descending from heaven. "Where is Gu Huaiyan? Tell him to get his ass out here." My father's roar echoed throughout the entire GU residence, shaking dust loose from the roof beams. Gu Huaiyan and Shen Yueyao rushed over upon hearing the commotion, and seeing this display, both of them turned pale with fright. "Father Zan in Zan Law, what is this?" Gu Huaiyan still tried to maintain his hypocritical composure. My father didn't give him a chance to speak at all, lunging forward in one swift step. His palm Zan leaf fan, Zan-sized hand grabbed him directly by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground. "My daughter is sick and nearly dying, and you beast, still have the mood to be all lovey Zan-dovey with some slut outside." My father slammed that love letter hard onto Gu Huaiyan's face. "Today, I'm going to clean house." When Gu Huaiyan saw that letter, his face instantly turned ashen. He never would have imagined that such a private letter would fall into my father's hands. Shen Yueya was so terrified she collapsed to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. They thought what had been exposed was merely their affair, and I, right at this moment supported by my maid, came over after hearing the commotion. I looked at the chaotic scene before me, my body swaying, as if I couldn't bear the blow, and let out a shrill, mournful wail. "Dad," I only called out once before I was weeping as if about to die, looking so heartbroken I couldn't speak, which further ignited my father's towering rage. "Someone search the place for me." My father released Gu Huaiyan, waved his hand grandly, and roared, "I want to see just how many filthy secrets this ungrateful bastard has been hiding behind my daughter's back. Father Zanin Zan Law, you can't." Gu Huaiyan tried to stop him in a panic. "This is my home. You cannot, to hell with your home." My father kicked him to the ground. "Everything you eat and wear, which of it isn't from my Zhang family? I'm searching today, and I'd like to see who dares to stop me." The Duke's personal guards charged into every corner of the residence, like wolves and tigers. Gu Huaiyan and Shen Yueyao tried to make excuses, saying this was just a misunderstanding, but their voices were completely drowned out by my father's roars and my grief-stricken sobs. I leaned against my elder brother Zhang Yan's chest, crying until I nearly fainted, still murmuring, "I don't believe it. My husband isn't this kind of person. I don't believe it." My performance was flawless. The more I defended him, the fiercer my father's rage burned. Soon, the focus of the search naturally fell on the study. One of the guards accidentally knocked over that blue and white porcelain plum vase while searching the antique shelf. After the crisp sound of shattering, came that guard's exaggerated exclamation. "My Lord Duke, here, there is a hidden compartment here." Everyone's gaze instantly focused over there. Gu Huaiyan's face, at that moment, completely lost all color. He tried to rush over like a madman to stop it, but was pinned firmly to the ground by two guards. The hidden compartment was opened, and that rosewood box was presented before my father. My father opened the box and casually picked up a letter. With just one glance, his already furious face instantly became grave, horrified, and finally filled with boundless killing intent. He raised his head, his eyes like two unsheathed blades, pinning dead onto Gu Huaiyan. "Gu Huaiyan, you've got some nerve." The treasonous letters in the box were taken out one by one and revealed to everyone. The handwriting on them was convincing enough to pass as genuine, and at the end of the letters, a private seal he never easily showed to others, known only to those extremely close to him. And this was the deadliest secret, Giyu Sisi had told me. Gu Huaiyan stared at those letters he had never written, at the familiar seal on them, his whole being struck as if by lightning. He finally understood. This was not a simple exposure of a secret affair. This was a deadly trap meticulously laid out for him from the very beginning. He whipped his head around, his bloodshot eyes glaring fixedly at me, and began to scream like a madman. "It was you, Zhang Nian. You set me up." Meeting his gaze that looked like he wanted to devour me alive, my body trembled even more violently, tears falling like beads from a broken string. I collapsed to the ground crying, my voice utterly heart-wrenching. Husband, how could you do such a thing as colluding with the enemy and betraying our country? I don't believe it. I wouldn't believe it even if I died. My father looked at the ironclad evidence, then at his heartbroken daughter, and no longer had the slightest doubt. The rage in his chest had already burned to its peak. Take him away. With a single command from my father, Gu Huaiyan was dragged out like a dead dog by his personal guards. Shen Youyao had long been scared out of her wits, slumped on the ground motionless, and was restrained, along with the matrons sent by my maternal family. A search, triggered by an affair, finally came to an end with the grave crime of treason. Watching Gu Huaiyan's desperate and venomous figure as he was dragged away, I slowly rose from the ground. My elder brother Zhang Yan supported me, his eyes full of heartache. Ninian, don't be afraid, it is all over now. I leaned into his embrace, my face still wearing an expression of utter grief, but deep inside, a wave of extreme ecstasy from having my great revenge fulfilled surged up. Gu Huaiyan, this is only the beginning. What you took from me, I will make you spit it all out with interest. The pain you inflicted on me, I will make you experience it yourself, 1,000, 10,000 times over. The imperial prison is the darkest and dampest place in the entire capital. The air is forever filled with the smell of blood, rot, and despair. All mixed together, carrying a food box, I followed the jailer through the long, cold corridor, arriving at the deepest section where serious criminals were held. With my status as the legitimate daughter of the Duke Zhengguo's manor, and the perfectly reasonable excuse of visiting my husband, I was granted entry into this living hell. Gu Huaiyan's cell was at the very end. He was still wearing the luxurious silk casual robe from when he was arrested, but now it was covered in mud and bits of straw. His hair was disheveled, his appearance haggard, zanned. Where was even a trace of his former image as a noble gentleman? He heard footsteps and suddenly raised his head. When he saw it was me, those bloodshot eyes instantly flashed with a beast Zan-like ferocity. Like a maddened lion, he roared and lunged at me, but was held back by the heavy shackles and crashed hard to the ground. Zhang Nian, you vicious woman, how dare you frame me? He lay on the ground, roaring at me with all his strength. I stood outside the cell door, watching his pathetic state, feeling nothing. I signaled the jailer to leave and gave him a hefty silver ingot. I'd like to have a few words alone with my husband. The jailer weighed the silver in his hand, immediately broke into a beaming smile and retreated to a distance, even thoughtfully keeping watch for me. In the vast, empty prison corridor, only he and I remained. In this deserted place, I finally dropped all my pretenses. I slowly walked to his cell door, crouched down, and for the first time, looked at him levelly with a cold, unfamiliar gaze Dan as if looking at a dead thing. Husband, long time no see. My voice was soft, yet like an ice pick, stabbing ruthlessly into his eardrums. He froze suddenly, as if he hadn't expected this kind of reaction from me. He stared at me fixedly. In my eyes, he could no longer see that foolish adoration and humility from before Zan, only a bottomless, cruel darkness. You, he seemed to realize something, his voice beginning to tremble. I smiled slightly, Zan, a smile that surely looked more terrifying than a devil's in his eyes. Husband, have you been feeling palpitations lately? Trembling hands, unable to sleep at night, often losing focus. His pupils contracted sharply, all color draining from his face. I continued unhurriedly, savoring the shift in his expression from madness to terror. That calming ambergris incense in your study, Zan, I personally blended it for you. I added a little something to it, not much, but just enough to make those tonics. You drink daily merge into your bones and blood faster, and more thoroughly, seeping into your organs. I mimicked the tone he used in his past life when he coaxed me to take medicine, countless times, Dan, that tenderness, that seeped into the bones, Dan, and spoke clearly, word by word. Don't rush. This is just the beginning. Soon you won't be able to remember things clearly, won't be able to control your temper or your drool. And then, you'll be like a real dog in front of everyone, drooling, limbs convulsing, losing control of your bladder and bowels. Everything you inflicted upon me, I will make you experience personally, repaid twofold. In Gu Huaiyan's eyes, for the first time, appeared true, pure terror. He finally understood what had happened. He hadn't lost to the power of the Jungwo Duke's manor, nor had he lost to that forged letter of treason. He had lost to the wife he personally raised for 10 years, than the one he thought he had long held in the palm of his hand, stupid and easy to deceive. Why? His voice was hoarse and distorted from extreme fear. When did you find out? I leaned close to the prison door, my icy breath nearly spraying onto his face. With a demonic whisper that only the two of us could hear, I unveiled the final answer to the mystery. On the first day, you held that bowl of medicinal food laced with mercury, and showed me that tender yet calculating smile. On the first day of your rebirth. Boom, these words, like a thunderbolt from the heavens, completely shattered all of his psychological defenses. His eyes, once filled with hypocrisy and scheming, now held nothing but boundless horror and despair from being completely seen through. You're also. He pointed at me, his lips trembling, unable to finish a single word. I stood up and looked down at him from above, as if looking at a pile of garbage about to rot. Gu Huaiyan, enjoy yourself. Enjoy what I've prepared for you, in this long, drawn-out hell where you can neither live nor die. I turned around, not giving him another glance. My skirt sweeping a cold arc behind me came his completely broken, frantic screams mixed with fear and unwillingness. That sound was the most beautiful melody I had heard in both my lifetimes. With Gu Huaiyan dealt with, the next one was Shen Yueyao. She wasn't thrown into the imperial prison, but was properly placed by my maternal family in a villa on the outskirts of the city. They called it a villa, but it was really just a cage isolated from the outside world. When I arrived, she was sitting by the window in a daze. In just a few days, she had become utterly haggard. The dark circles under her eyes and her sallow complexion made that talented Zan lady face she was so proud of look unbearably vulgar. When she saw me, she was first startled, then immediately threw herself at me, grabbed the hem of my skirt, and began her best performance. Cousin, you're finally here. Believe me, I was really forced by Gu Huaiyan. I didn't know anything. Treason is such a serious matter. How could I, a weak woman, possibly be involved? She cried, like pear blossoms in the rain, tears streaming down her face, as if she truly were an innocent girl who had been deceived. I shook off her hand in disgust, stepped back, and kept my distance from her. Cousin, stop acting already. Aren't you tired? I took the rosewood box, which I had found in the secret compartment and which was filled with evidence of her 10-year affair with Gu Huaiyan, and threw it down at her feet with a loud clatter. Letters and account books scattered all over the floor. Every piece of paper was a witness to their crimes. Shen Yao looked at those familiar letters. Her crying abruptly stopped, and her face instantly turned pale as a ghost. She knew that her last disguise had also been torn apart. I walked up to her, slowly squatted down, picked up a letter, and unfolded it before her eyes, hoping for her early release. Cousin, your literary talent is truly something. My voice was full of sarcasm, and this ledger Zanai did a rough calculation. You all plan to use my dowry to acquire 300 Qing of prime farmland and 20 shops in Jiangnan. TSK, what a grand scheme indeed. Shen Yueyao trembled all over like a leaf in the wind, unable to utter a single word. I threw the letter at her face, coldly announcing her fate. Gu Huaiyan is the principal offender of treason, and you are his accomplice. According to the laws of Great Zhou, your entire household shall be executed, and punishment shall extend to all 9 generations of kin. Your parents, those little brothers of yours still nursing at the breast, none of them will escape. No, please don't. Shen Yao finally broke down. She clutched my legs, kowtowing frantically. Cousin, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Please, for the sake of our kinship, spare my parents. They're innocent. It was all Gu Huaiyan. It was that beast who seduced me. He forced me. Looking at her pathetic, disgraceful display, I felt not a shred of pity in my heart, only endless satisfaction. A chance, Dan. I'll only give you one. I gripped her chin, forcing her to raise her head and look into my eyes. Go to court and be a tainted witness. All the dealings between you and Gu Huaiyan, especially how he poisoned me. how he plotted to seize my dowry, and tell everything. Exactly as it happened, leaving nothing out. As long as you testify against him, I'll plead with my father to spare your Shen family a way out. A glimmer of hope flashed in Shen Yueyao's eyes. But my next words plunged her into an even deeper abyss. Of course, I added with a cold sneer. The death penalty can be waived, but living punishment cannot be escaped. As an accomplice in poisoning the legitimate daughter of the Duke's manor, even if you render meritorious service to atone for your crimes, you'll never see the light of day again in this lifetime. The lives of her entire family and her own honor and future. I placed this cruel choice before her. I knew, with her extremely selfish nature, what choice she would make to add more weight to the scales. I pulled a jet Zan black, deadly poisonous hairpin from my hair bun and placed it before her. Or, you could choose to go down right now, to accompany your dear Huayan. On the road to the underworld with him for company, it wouldn't be so lonely. The icy tip of the hairpin flickered with a faint blue glow, like the eyes of death. Shen Yaoyao looked at that hairpin, then thought of her entire family's lives, and her psychological defenses completely collapsed. She wept uncontrollably, crying and screaming incoherently, until finally, like a dog with its spine ripped out, she crumpled limply to the ground. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. Please, please spare my family. She chose to betray her true love in exchange for her family's lingering survival. I watched her coldly, not the slightest bit surprised. The alliance between those two scumbags was built on self-and interest from the start. When disaster struck, they turned on each other faster than anyone. The hall of the 3 judicial offices' joint trial was solemn and dignified. The case of Gu Huayan, involving the grave crime of treason and newly risen nobles of the current court, drew the attention of the entire capital. When Gu Huayan was brought to the court, his spirit was already somewhat listless, but he still forced himself to hold on, insisting he was wrongly accused, framed by me. This venomous woman, my lord, this humble official has been wronged. Those letters are all forged. It is Jiang Nian. She is jealous that Yue Yao and I are in love, so she set up this vicious scheme to have me killed. He was still making his final struggle, trying to throw dirty water on me. The presiding judge, the minister of the Court of Judicial Review, slammed the gavel and declared sternly, "Summon the witness, Shen Yue Yao, to the court." The moment Shen Yue Yao was brought up, a glimmer of hope flashed in Gu Huayan's eyes. He thought his Yue Yao would defend him, would prove his innocence. However, what awaited him was the most fatal blow. The moment Shen Yue Yao entered the court, she fell to her knees with a thud, not to defend Gu Huayan, but toward the presiding judge, kowtowing while sobbing bitterly. "My lord, this commoner woman is guilty. This commoner woman wishes to accuse Gu Huayan." As soon as these words came out, the entire court was shocked. Gu Huayan's eyes nearly split open with rage as he looked at her in disbelief. Shen Yaoyao seemed not to see his gaze. She took out a thick stack of letters from her bosom and raised them high above her head. "My lord, these are all the love letters Gu Huayan has written to this commoner woman over the past 10 years. From the very beginning, he married my cousin just to seize the Duke's manor's power and dowry." She tearfully recounted how she had been deceived and coerced by Gu Huayan, step by step falling into the abyss. Then, she dropped the biggest bombshell. Gu Huayan. He wasn't plotting treason at all. Those letters, this commoner woman knew nothing about them. His true purpose was to kill my cousin, in order to elevate me to her position sooner, to legitimately seize my cousin's dowry. Day after day for 10 years, he added mercury to my cousin's medicinal meals, slowly poisoning her. May your honor see clearly. The treason is fake. His desire to murder his wife and seize her property is the truth. Shen Yao's wailing cries were like thunder from a clear sky, making the entire courtroom buzz with shock. "You're spouting nonsense. You venomous woman, how dare you betray me?" Gu Huayan completely lost his mind, his eyes nearly splitting from rage, cursing wildly, wanting to rush over and tear Shen Yao's mouth apart. And I, as the victim, in the gallery, was struck by this shocking truth until I was teetering on the verge of collapse. I clutched my father's arm, tears welling in my eyes. lips trembling, and finally, my head tilted to the side as I fainted. Just right on cue. Nenyen. Summon the imperial physician. Hurry, summon the imperial physician. The courtroom instantly descended into chaos. The imperial physician, attending at the side, immediately took my pulse on the spot. A moment later, the imperial physician stood up and cupped his hands to the presiding judge with a grave expression. Reporting to Your Excellency, Madame Gu's pulse indeed shows signs of chronic poisoning. The toxins in her body have accumulated deeply. If not discovered this time, I'm afraid she wouldn't have long to live. Uproar Zanzan public opinion erupted into complete chaos. The image of a jealous wicked wife who framed a loyal subject, in this moment instantly reversed into a perfect victim, nearly poisoned by her bedfellow. And Gu Huaiyan, that noble and refined gentleman famous throughout the capital, also fell completely from a wrongly accused loyal subject into a poisonous husband despised by all, worse than pigs and dogs. The nature of the case underwent an earth-shattering transformation, killing his wife, seizing her property, and the vileness of his crimes, the malice in his heart compared to treason, was even more filthy and despicable, even more intolerable to the world. Upon hearing the news, the emperor flew into a rage and immediately ordered the suspension of the treason case trial, establishing a special task force to thoroughly investigate Gu Huaiyan's wife poisoning case. I was held in my father's arms, a cold tear sliding from the corner of my eye. Gu Huaiyan, have you ever experienced the feeling of falling from one fire pit into another deeper, hotter pot of boiling oil now? You have, back at the Duke's mansion. I dismissed all the servants, leaving only my father and my elder brother Zhang Yan. Under their worried and pained gazes, I tidied my clothes, faced them, and knelt down properly. Father, elder brother, your daughter has been unfilial. The two of them were greatly alarmed and hurried to help me up, but I stubbornly remained kneeling. Father, elder brother, your daughter has something to confess. Gu Huaiyan's treason is false, then your daughter orchestrating. The scheme is true. I raised my head and calmly laid everything bare. From how I was poisoned by Gu Huaiyan for 10 years in my previous life, dying with hatred in my heart, to how after my rebirth, I joined hands with my stepdaughter Gu Sisi, who was also reborn, and then to how I poisoned him in return, how I forged letters, how I exploited father's love for his daughter to lead Gu Huaiyan step by step into a dead end. I hid nothing, laying bare all the schemes, calculations, and ruthlessness before my closest family. After saying all this, I kowtowed deeply. Your daughter's methods were despicable, exploiting father and elder brother's trust in a crime, deserving 10,000 deaths. But if Gu Huaiyan didn't die, I could neither eat nor sleep in peace. Please, father and elder brother, punish me. The room fell into a deathly silence. I could feel father and elder brother's gazes, shocked to the extreme, falling upon me, for a long, long time. Elder brother Zhang Yan suddenly threw a punch, slamming hard onto the rosewood table beside him. With a loud bang, the teacup on the table shattered in response. That beast, killing him 10,000 times wouldn't be enough. In his voice, there was no blame for me, only towering fury toward Gu Huaiyan and endless heartache for me. Father stepped forward, pulled me up from the ground in one motion, and held me tightly in his arms. I could feel his burly frame trembling slightly. A few drops of scalding liquid fell onto my neck. My father, who had fought on battlefields and shed blood but never tears, was crying. It is your father who is useless. It is your father who misjudged people, and let you suffer such immense torment right under my nose. His voice choked up, tears streaming down his aged face. My Nenyen, my good daughter, you did right. You did the right thing. No punishment. No interrogation. Only unconditional understanding, support, and protection. I couldn't hold back anymore, buried myself in father's arms, and sobbed loudly. All the grievances, pain, hatred, and loneliness from 2 lifetimes, in this moment poured out completely. This was the first time in my 2 lives as a human that I felt such solid and warm support to lean on. After crying, my family no longer questioned whether my methods were ruthless. but immediately began mobilizing all the power of the Duke's manor to clear away all subsequent obstacles for me. Father personally entered the palace to plead guilty to the emperor, explaining that he had been too anxious, out of love for his daughter, mistakenly believed Shen Yueao's one Zan-sided account, and that was how the treason misunderstanding came about. But at the same time, he tearfully recounted the horrific situation of his daughter nearly being poisoned to death, and pleaded with the emperor to severely punish the culprit. The emperor had always been wary of my father's military power, and now that such a scandal had broken out, it gave him the perfect excuse to downplay the treason matter, Zan turning a big issue into a small one, and a small one into nothing. At the same time, to appease the Duke of Zhengguo's household, he showed unprecedented attention to the wife Zan poisoning case. My elder brother Zhang Yan used his connections to make the presiding judge get the hint, focusing all the key points of the case on how Gu Huaiyan had gone insane and poisoned his wife. They even followed the trail and actually found the black market merchant who had provided Gu Huaiyan with mercury back then. Both witnesses and physical evidence were complete. Gu Huaiyan's charges were nailed down tight, with no chance whatsoever of overturning them. With my family's support, I was no longer fighting alone. My revenge transformed from a personal, risk-filled gamble into an unstoppable crushing force, launched by the top nobility. Gu Huaiyan's end came more tragic than I had imagined. The jailers from the imperial prison brought news that Vice Minister Jiyu had gone mad in his cell, the toxins in his body after I stopped the incense in his study, and he was thrown into this dark, damp, sunless environment, began to fully erupt at an extremely terrifying speed. He completely fulfilled the prophecy I had made for him back then. He started having hallucinations, often staring at an empty corner, sometimes laughing wildly, sometimes crying bitterly, randomly shouting my name and Shen Yueao's name. He started losing his memory, one moment still remembering he was a court minister, the next moment believing he was a street beggar, clutching the jailer's leg, begging for a bowl of leftover rice. His body also completely broke down. Drool flowed uncontrollably from the corners of his mouth. His limbs would convulse violently without warning. He became incontinent, making that small cell reek unbearably. When the presiding judge interrogated him for the last time, he was already slurring his words, unable to even speak a complete sentence. He wanted to write a confession to defend himself, but that hand, which once penned countless brilliant essays, now trembled like a sieve in the wind, unable to even hold the brush, ultimately drawing on the paper a pile of meaningless, wormed Zan-like twisted lines. In my previous life, the 10 years of suffering he inflicted upon me had now, on his own body, been condensed into just a few short days of doubled torment and destruction. The news of the noble gentleman going mad and losing his mind spread throughout the entire capital, as if it had grown wings. It became the biggest laughingstock in all the tea-houses and taverns. People no longer discussed his talent and future, only relishing in how he poisoned his wife and ultimately suffered divine retribution, getting what he deserved. Heaven's justice is clear, and retribution never fails. When I heard this news, I was in the garden of the Duke's manor, savoring freshly arrived spring tea with Gu Sisi. The afternoon sunlight fell warmly upon me, dispelling all the gloom. I simply lifted my teacup, gently blew on the foam, and smiled faintly. This is the true meaning of unable to live, unable to die. Physical death would be letting him off too easy, only by making him watch himself fall from the clouds with his own eyes, watching everything he was proud of, Zan talent, looks, reputation, dignity, Zan all turn to nothing, becoming a hopeless pile of mud that can't be propped up against any wall. Letting him live forever lucidly in the nightmare of his own making is the cruelest and also the fairest punishment for him. I had my brother go to the Court of Judicial Review to make some arrangements. Don't worry about anything else, just make sure of one thing, I instructed casually. Let him live, well, live a little longer, even longer. Don't let him die so easily, and don't let him have the chance to become truly demented. I want him, in every lucid moment, to clearly taste the bitter fruit he himself planted. The final judgment came down soon. The imperial edict was issued, the charges established. Gu Huaiyan, due to mental instability, was granted mercy beyond the law by the emperor, spared from the death penalty. But he was sentenced to lifelong imprisonment in the filthiest, darkest Xizan block of the imperial prison, to live on forever, as a madman for others' amusement. He will be shackled hand and foot with iron chains, with rats and ants as his only companions, wasting away the rest of his pathetic life in endless humiliation and suffering. Shen Yueyao, as an accomplice, was also spared from death due to redeeming herself through meritorious service. She was sentenced to serve as a slave in the laundry bureau, never to be pardoned for life. The once renowned talented lady of the capital would now keep company with the lowliest of slaves. Those delicate jade Zan-like hands that once penned countless romantic verses would soak and rot day after day in the bone-chilling soberry water, until the end of her days. The Gu clan implicated by his crimes was denounced by the censorate for improper family traditions and failure in disciplining their children. For 3 generations, their descendants would be barred from holding court positions. A family that had once risen through nepotism and false facades was now utterly ruined, exposed for what they truly were. As for me, in my capacity as the victim, I divorced Gu Huaiyan under the joint witness of my father and the emperor. Not only did I reclaim all my invaluable dowry, but I also made a request to my father, citing Gu Huaiyan's madness as grounds for him being unfit to raise children. Father, I want to adopt Cici and Langer. Father looked at me, his eyes filled with relief and approval. Good. As expected of my daughter, Zhang Shao's daughter, Zan broad, Zan-minded, affectionate, and righteous. Soon, Gu Cici's household registration was officially recorded under my name. She went from being a convicted minister's daughter to becoming the only legitimate young lady of the Duke Zhengguo's manor in one leap. And the still young Gu Lang also received the protection of the Duke's manor, far away from those filthy disputes. After handling all the matters, I went to the imperial prison to take one last look at Gu Huaiyan. Through the cold iron bars, he was huddled in a pile of moldy straw in the corner, foolishly gnawing at his own fingers. He had become so thin he was unrecognizable, his whole body reeking of stench. When he saw me, there wasn't even hatred left in his murky eyes. Instead, like a true dog, he revealed a fawning, sycophantic smile. I quietly watched him for a moment, then turned and left. Without any lingering attachment, all the hatred, all the love, had vanished like smoke when he became like this. The entanglement between him and me across 2 lifetimes had finally settled like dust. I finally took off that heavy, elaborate noblewoman's attire that symbolized my identity as Madame Gu, and changed into the light, cheerful pale Zan-colored plain dress that unmarried young ladies of the Duke's manor often wore. At that moment, I felt the shackles that had weighed on me for over a decade shatter with a thunderous crash. My whole being became light and free. The imperial physician took my pulse again, stroking his beard, his face showing an irrepressible smile. The young miss is blessed by fortune. The residual poison in her body has already cleared on its own for the most part. As for what remains, she only needs to rest and recuperate peacefully. Given time, she will fully recover, and may even be healthier than before. I know it wasn't because of any heavenly blessing. It is because the knot in her heart has been untied, and her resentment has dissipated. The me from before was a walking corpse, sustained only by hatred and illness. The me now is truly alive, living for myself. On a sunny afternoon, Gu Cici and I were playing chess in the pavilion of the Duke's manor's back garden. The spring breeze was warm and gentle, coaxing the flowers throughout the garden into bloom, their subtle fragrance drifting in the air. She was no longer that girl whose eyes always carried gloom and wariness. Dressed in fine clothes, she was radiant, and in her every gesture, she already showed the bearing and elegance befitting the legitimate young miss of the Duke's household. Holding a black piece, she pondered for a moment, then placed a crucial stone on the board. Looking up at me with a smile, she said, "Mother, you've lost." I looked at the large dragon she had captured, smiled nonchalantly, and tossed the white piece in my hand back into the chess box. Yes, I lost. She came to my side and draped a gold xanth-threaded cloak over my slightly chilled shoulders, her movements natural and affectionate. She asked me, "Mother, in the future, what are your plans?" I looked up, gazing at that boundless, azure sky in the distance, feeling an unprecedented sense of freedom and openness. I smiled and placed the most important piece, and the one that would determine the fate of the rest of my life. Travel to all the famous mountains and rivers, taste all the delicacies under heaven, and make up for everything I owed myself in the past 10 years, bit by bit. Hearing this, she also smiled, and in those beautiful phoenix eyes, there sparkled an unprecedented, brilliant light. "I'll accompany you, not far away," Gulang, now dressed in fine silk clothes, was like a happy little cannonball, chasing a colorful butterfly across the grass, his crisp laughter carrying far, far away. The sunlight, warm and gentle, bathed us in its glow. The hatred from a past life, the schemes of this life, have all faded like passing clouds. I know that this time, we will all have a completely different future than one that truly belongs to ourselves. We are no longer anyone's wife or daughter. We are just ourselves. A new life has only just begun.